Welcome, and this is being recorded. So, welcome to this joint event organized with the University of Chicago Alumni Club, the Yale Club of Japan, here at Temple University, Japan. I'm Robert Dujarric. I'm extremely happy to welcome Rochelle, who has been very kind in that she has given numerous talks at Temple. And not only is she's also participated in many of our events, and she is the head and founder of Japan Intercultural Consulting. So if you ever have a question about how to deal with multicultural environments in your company or in your industry, please ask her. And she's here to talk about the Jingu Gaien redevelopment controversy. She's been very active on this. There was an article about her in Tokyo Metropolitan. And so without further ado, because you're here to listen to her, not to me, I'll give the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to see if I can try and sit down while I'm talking because we got a little perch here.
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks everyone for coming out, and I'm always glad to have a chance to talk about Jingu Gaien, and I feel like lately it's all I talk about. So what I did is I put in the materials. This is the slide that I normally use in my everyday work when I'm introducing myself as a consultant. So my day job is as a cross-cultural expert. I teach training seminars for people from other countries to understand Japan better, and for people from Japan to understand other countries better. I also do a lot of leadership, a lot of diversity, sexual harassment prevention, team buildings, executive coaching, all sorts of those types of things. So I've been doing this for a really long time. I actually started my firm 28 years ago. And in addition to, well, actually I should say on the right, you can get a sense of some of the kind of clients I work with. So major Japanese and global companies. I also am outside director at 2 Japanese listed companies, and I'm a visiting professor at Showa Women's University. I write for several Japanese publications, so I definitely keep busy doing a lot of things. But my main gig is understanding Japanese culture and helping people from outside Japan understand it, and vice versa. So then the question is, why am I an activist? Drumming up signatures on a petition and giving press conferences at City Hall. I've done 3 this year at the Tokyo Metropolitan Office Building in Shinjuku. And sort of the background for this is I kind of saw an opportunity where I might be able to make a unique contribution. So I've always been interested in trees and nature and issues of urban development. And I had a couple of experiences in the United States involved with community groups that were protesting development projects. And there was one 20 years ago where the neighborhood I lived in Chicago, it was a developer who was in cahoots with the alderman, and a very kind of, the same developer had sold the alderman their home at way below market price. So it was like this sort of cozy relationship, let's say. And they were going to put a completely inappropriate outsized movie theater in the very quiet neighborhood that I lived in. And they were going to build it so that there were not enough parking spaces for the theater, so that the cars from the theater would have just completely overwhelmed the neighborhood. And they were going to put it across the street from a school, which actually they're not supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. There are all these problems. And so my neighbors and I banded together.
So this is actually good.
And you always kind of a group of people, so I'm not sure why I was the one that the alderman decided to call. But eventually the alderman called me up and said, "You win." If any of you know anything about Chicago politics, there are very few people walking the face of the earth who have ever had a Chicago alderman tell them, "You win." So that was an early experience I had, that you can have success by standing up for things that are inappropriate. So going back to last year, I'm kind of a Twitter addict, and I have accounts in both Japanese and English. And I had seen a post about plans for a public viewing site in Yoyogi Park. And this was part of the Olympic plans. They were going to have a place with giant screens so that people who couldn't attend the events could get together and do so in a convivial atmosphere, which probably makes a lot of sense as an idea if there weren't a pandemic going on. And what caught my eye was people in the neighborhood who were upset because there were signs that said, in order to build this facility for the public viewing, they were going to lop off a bunch of tree limbs on the trees in Yoyogi Park. And some of the trees, they were going to take down all the limbs under, I forgot what it was, 8 meters or some, actually relatively high height. And so the prospect of trees just having their limbs chopped off for a temporary event that really should not have even been happening during a pandemic, I just thought was crazy. And Kenji Utsunomiya had done a change.org petition in protest of the Tokyo Olympics that was getting a lot of attention. And I thought, oh, well, maybe petitions are something that are becoming a useful tool in Japan now. Maybe I'll do a petition against cutting down the tree limbs and building this completely unneeded public viewing facility. And I thought, who's really going to be interested in this? It seemed like kind of a minor topic, but I thought, what the heck, why don't I try? I've got a lot of Twitter followers, maybe someone will pick up on it. Well, next thing you knew, I could not do any work for an entire week. I was continually being interviewed on Japanese TV shows, and all the newspapers were calling me up, and ended up with over 150,000 signatures on my petition. And eventually, Governor Koike said that they weren't going to hold the public viewing. They ended up, slipperily, building the facility anyways, and they were going to make it into a vaccination center for policemen and firemen, which of course is a usage that no one could possibly object to. They did, however, a reporter from the Asahi Shimbun got someone from the government on record saying that they cut down fewer limbs on the trees than they originally been planning because they knew they were being watched. So that was not a complete victory, but it was something of a victory. So then this February, when I found out about the plans for Jingu Gaien, which I'll tell you the details in a minute, but they involve removing over 1,000 trees, I thought, wow, if people were so upset about lopping off tree limbs in Yoyogi Park, how are they going to feel when they find out that 1,000 trees are going to be removed? Probably not happy. And I put a little note on my Japanese Twitter, wow, this looks really bad. Maybe I should do another petition. And everyone said, yes, do another petition. I'm like, okay, I'll do another petition. So since February of this year, it's been my crazy obsession. And now we're at 109,000 signatures on the petition. So why am I so interested in this? And a lot of people hear about this issue like, oh, 1,000 trees, that's bad. But actually, it's not just about the trees. I have spent my entire career trying to understand Japanese organizations and how they make decisions. And that's a lot of what I consult with my clients on, to try and understand, for example, if it's a overseas company that is trying to sell things to a Japanese company, or I also deal with a lot of non-Japanese executives who work inside Japanese companies. And so a lot of the topics I deal with is how do decisions get made and how do you influence what happens? Well, from my point of view, this has been a real education in how things can happen in the public sphere in Japan and what some of the issues are. And if any of you have ever read, and if you haven't, I suggest you do, Gods and Demons by Alex Kerr, classic book on problems with Japanese development. Basically, the Jingu Gaien issue is bringing to life what's in this book, what's in his book, because he talked about the fact that once there is a concept of a project in the Japanese government, it is very, very hard to stop it, that they take on a life of their own. And that seems to be what's happened with Jingu Gaien. So it's really a microcosm of a lot of issues that are going on in many different places in Japan. where the Japanese government is very, and the economy overall is very addicted to an old-fashioned, some might call it a Showa era, construction-centric model of development, particularly with public entities building stadiums and museums and halls of various types, putting a lot of public money into them, keeping the coffers of construction companies full. And so this Jingu Gaien project features a lot of that, despite the fact that, particularly with Japan's shrinking population, that all these structures may not be needed. There's an incredible environmental cost of building big buildings. In the case of Jingu Gaien, tearing down perfectly good ones to build them. And also, a lot of the ones that have been built, they don't pay for themselves. The new national stadium built for the Olympics is a wash in red ink. All our taxes are going to keep that thing maintained because it's not bringing in any revenue. Lack of attention to environmental issues is a huge issue in Japan overall, and there's of course lots of different ways, and that could be a whole lecture in itself. I attended a lecture on Saturday by a heat island effect expert, a Japanese professor, and he showed a really shocking graph of how the average temperature in the world has been going up in the last 100 years. And pretty much in parallel to that, how the average temperatures in New York and also Beijing have been going up. Then on top of it was the temperature rise in Tokyo, which the other one went like this, the one in Tokyo went like this. So Tokyo is getting hotter at a rate that significantly exceeds the rest of the world and is much more than other large cities. So there is something going on in Tokyo that is a big issue because not enough attention has been paid to preserving greenery and other environmental issues. There's a lack of public voice in urban planning in Japan, and since I started working on the Jingu Gaien project, I found about similar issues with redevelopment that are threatening parks all over the country. And we'll talk in a moment about how putting in revenue-generating facilities is part of this plan. Similar plans all over the place. Doho Park in Tsukuba, they want to put in a microbrewery and a glamping facility in the middle of a quiet, leafy park that is used by families. In the Kyoto Prefectural Botanical Garden, a beautiful green oasis, they're going to put in cafes, restaurants, and stores, and right next door a giant stadium. So like, just there's tons of examples like this. Yokohama, yet another stadium built in Mizusawa Park. There's already one there, no, they need the second one, etc. So that's a big issue. And then, of course, cozy relationships between business and politicians behind this. Oh, and of course, Detsu is involved in this story too. So it really is a microcosm of lots of things that are going on. So let me talk about Jingu Gaien. It's directly adjacent to where the new national stadium is. And if you look at all the little charts in front of you, you can see the new national stadium is basically on all of these charts. At upper left, it looks like a donut. So it's the area immediately adjacent to it, and it's the home of the famous Ginkgo Avenue, which is just past its peak right now. All the Ginkgo leaves are falling, but it's a famous icon in Tokyo, and it's been named as the #3 tree tunnel in the world. It's very popular with tourists. I've been going there a lot over the last couple of weeks as the leaves have been beautiful, and hear lots of English, lots of Korean, and lots of Chinese being spoken. It is a big hub for tourists to the city. And of course, lots of Japanese as well. And everyone's taking pictures of themselves. So it's a very popular attraction. There's lots of other things in Jingu Gaien. So the area that's going to be redeveloped is what you can see that's not grayed out in this picture. And it includes a lot of sports facilities. It includes 2 baseball stadiums and a rugby field and a tennis club and 4 cafes and batting center, indoor ball center, futsal court, etc. So there's all these different things in this So as a large space in the center of the city, Jingu Gaien became a redevelopment target. And as I said, this is actually happening with parks all over Japan. So if you think about it, if you are a developer who wants to make a big development, like they did with like Home Hills, some places like that, and any of the other developments that are going on. A lot of times it's really hard to do a development in Japan because you have to buy up all the properties that are there. And there's lots of little ones. Big hassle if you're a real estate company wanting to do a development. However, a park is really easy to deal with. You only have to deal with one entity, and it's a big open space. So that makes it really a delicious, tempting area for developers. And in fact, it appears, let's just say, that one of the big reasons for Japan wanting to host the 2020 Olympics was that it provided cover for changing the height restrictions in Jingu Gaien. It was like an excuse to make it possible to redevelop that area. So what we're seeing with the Jingu Gaien controversy is really a continuation of the Tokyo Olympics story. So the development plan is going to completely reshape the park. It's as if someone took a giant eraser to what's there and how do we move stuff around so we can make room for high-rise buildings. So the clear thing that's being emphasized in this plan is let's create some high rises to make money, building them and then make money from renting office space and stuff. So on this map, all the shaded areas are trees that are going to be cut down. That's about 1,000 trees total. And all the X's are sports facilities used by average Tokyoites that are going to go away and not be replaced. So we're going to lose the, it doesn't have an X, but this is the rugby stadium. That's going to go away. This is Jingu Stadium. That's going to go away. This is the second baseball stadium. It's used for a lot of like high school games, and it's also a golf practice area. These two are going to be changed locations and rebuilt. We'll talk about that in a second. I should have put next to this. This is public tennis courts. These are going to go away completely. These are the softball fields that are going to go away. This is the batting center. This is the indoor ball court. The futsal court is like over here somewhere, and it was actually closed a while ago, and they just never reopened it. It's hard to see, but there are cafes. There's a Shake Shack and a Royal Park Cafe, or Royal Garden Cafe, or something like that. And a Kihachi over here. Those are going to go away. There's another little cafe over here for baseball fans. That's going to go away. This is the roof of the private tennis club, and these are the courts for the private tennis club. Now, the private tennis club was just redone less than 10 years ago. Also, the golf practice area was just redone 10 years ago. So these are brand new, revised facilities. They're just going to be trashed in order to, in the service of making room for high rises. I took a look at the website for the tennis club. I don't play tennis, but the pictures of what this tennis club is like inside makes me want to take up tennis. They are stunningly beautiful. And with high ceilings and natural light. I mean, if you played tennis, this would be like your dream of where you want to play tennis. They were really nice. What they're going to do is since they're going to build the new baseball stadium here and the new rugby stadium over here, they're going to put it where these things are. So they're going to move these and they're going to put it in front of the Meiji Picture Gallery, which is over here. So 2/3 of this area is going to be taken up with a private tennis club. So, hey, it's symbolic right there. These are humble softball fields. And in taking away from the softball fields that common people can use cheaply to put in a very, very expensive fee-based tennis club. So there's a lot of fairness issues involved in this as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be changed based on this plan. So huge upheaval. It's also going to take like 13 years or something like that to build. So for all the people who live in the area who were kind of exhausted by the Olympic construction, 13 more years of upheaval in their neighborhood. They aren't happy about that as well. So currently, and there's some versions of these in front of you, this is what the park looks like now. Here's the rugby stadium, here's the tennis club, here's the baseball stadium, here's the second baseball stadium, here's the softball fields, etc. The yellow is the ginkgo trees. These little orange ones is the second smaller row of ginkgo trees that leads to the entrance to the rugby. So this is what's here. This is Itochu's headquarters building over here. So this is what's here now. This green part is a special little mini forest, and there's a thing in it that's called the Kenkoku-kinen Bunko, which is a structure, and it holds a bunch of, it's kind of like a time capsule is what I gather. It has a bunch of letters that people commemorate the founding of the country. So it's kind of a patriotic thing. So it's a little like a historical memorial thing. Nothing has been said about where that's going to go, but some people who are into history really care about that. So this is what the plan looks like. So this is going to be the new baseball stadium that is going to include a hotel attached to it. This is the new Itochu building. Current Itochu building is 90 meters. This is going to be 190 meters. There's going to be a tall office building here of 185 meters, and then an 80-meter one. And there's going to be a kind of arcade between these. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Then we've got the rugby, new rugby stadium, which is going to be here. And then here, as you can see, the tennis courts in front of the picture gallery. This is going to be an indoor one, and these are outdoor ones. So that's how they're moving it around. And so you can see here that a lot of the green is gone. There's a lot of green that's lost in here. Most of it's going to be gone. You just get a kind of a rump of it left. And also, given that it's like right next to where they're constructing it, I'd be worried that like the construction vehicles are going to trample some of these ones too. But anyways, you can see a lot of left. So this, all the ones marked in red are trees that are going to go away. And that actually adds up to 1,000 trees. So yes, some of the lumps have more than one tree in it, but that's what's going to go away. So there's a lot that's going away, and a lot you can see a lot of them are ones that are like fringes around this is where the baseball stadium is now. So the baseball stadium is kind of fringed with trees. So those will go away. These ginkgos that are parallel to the Ginkgo Avenue, these are all going away. And a lot of the trees that are in here are being sacrificed in order to put in the tennis club. And then you're getting all the trees that kind of ring around here, and then most of this Jingu Gaien is going to go away as well. So among the nearly 1,000 trees that are going to be, cut down, or they say now we're going to transplant them. I'll talk about that in a minute. But that there are huge ones like this, and then they're going to we're going to replant trees, but you don't get a tree this big by replanting, right? This is one that's taken 100 years to grow. And tree experts say that it's extremely difficult to transplant trees, and the bigger they are, the worse. I don't know if you've spent any time by the new national stadium. When they built the new national stadium for the Olympics, 1,500 trees were cut down. So already, a lot of the trees in Jingu Gaien have already been sacrificed for that construction. And frankly, when you hang out at the new national stadium, there is something just absolutely creepy about And one of the reasons is the trees that have been transplanted there, they, of the 1,500 they cut down, they tried to save a bunch of them, and they transplanted them, and they made a big deal. Oh, this is the Mori no Stadion, it's the, the forest stadium. So that forest around the stadium, the trees are all in really bad shape. And in fact, the Tokyo Shimbun brought in a tree expert who's like, look at the leaves, they're all yellow. Compare them to the trees across the street, which are not yellow. You know, it's pretty obvious. And then there are trees that just completely die. The other thing is, for some reason in Japan, when they transplant trees, they tend to take a lot of the limbs off. So they end up being these horrible looking sticks. And so when you walk around the National Stadium and you see these transplanted trees, they're like, you know, soldiers who come back from battle, you know, with missing limbs. It's really like the trees are disfigured. It's horrible. So this is one, and as you can see on the right, they actually tore it down. And it, you know, as of last March, around March or so, is when I took the picture on the left. So, you know, the trees they transplanted are not exactly working. So any assurances about transplanting trees, I just do not believe. Jingu Stadium is one of the 3 Romanian stadiums where Babe Ruth played. It really should be a landmark. For people who are baseball fans, they love this stadium. And in fact, it was voted as the 2nd favorite by Japanese fans. And the developers like to use the word decrepit, rokyuka in Japanese. They're like, oh, it's an old decrepit stadium. Well, I'm from Chicago, and Wrigley Field is about the same age. It was renovated, and it's one of the jewels of the city. Fenway Park in Boston is similar. And actually, the famous Koshien Stadium down in Osaka is even older than Jingu Gaien. And they just renovated it recently. So there is no reason why this stadium needs to be rebuilt. It could be renovated perfectly well. And of course, renovation would be the much more ecological choice. It's architecturally well preserved. So on the left is how it looked when it was built. On the right is how it looks now. It's really pretty much the same. And it really should be maintained as a landmark building. It has flavor and character. It was actually designed by the same architect who did the picture gallery, which is another part of Jingu Gaien that's outside of the development area. But that's right there, it's a landmark. Why wouldn't another building built at the same time by the same architect also be a landmark? Then there's the Chichibunomiya Rugby Stadium. And for Japanese rugby fans, it's very historic and it's viewed as sacred ground. You'll hear so many rugby fans say this. Part of rugby, I'm told, is playing in any weather, and that's a tradition in the sport. The planned new rugby stadium, it prioritizes events like concerts, and it's going to have actually a smaller space for rugby spectators. It's going to have artificial grass, which is for rugby fans really controversial and bad, and it's also going to have a roof. So it's totally not prioritizing rugby. It's like a rugby stadium in name only. It's like, let's build a facility so we can make money with concerts. Not to mention that the new national stadium is right there and you can use that for concerts. And it's hardly ever being used in its bleeding ready. But no, they want to build another huge structure right next to it. So really, you know, the Jingu Stadium, the rugby stadium, the Ginkgo Avenue, all the surrounding trees, it's this big area without high-rises, so you get a clear view of the sky, and it really is a special place in Tokyo that should be preserved. There's also the sports facilities like the softball fields, so there's a view of those. Again, there's not very many places like this in central Tokyo. The cafes next to the Ginkgo Avenue are very popular, and a lot of people have really important things that they do there. I've seen lists of like the best place to go on a date in Tokyo, and often these are included. A lot of people have wedding receptions and things like that in these cafes. This whole plan, the word in Japanese they use is machi-zukuri. We're creating a vibrant urban space is sort of one of the advertising type catchphrases they're using for the plan. Well, this is already a vibrant urban space. Why would you tear down are much better. So this is a little animation that shows you what, in terms of scale, these new buildings are going to look like that are going in, and you can see how large they are. They're just very bulky. The bulky rugby stadium, and then the tall high rises, and then all the tennis stuff in there. So you see how this redevelopment is just completely going to remake this space, and how it provides multiple profit opportunities for whoever is doing that construction. One other thing that's controversial is that the planned commercial facilities are just so damn tacky. I saw this picture. It's on the website of the developer. It's kind of the area that connects the high-rise buildings and the hotels, etc. And I saw this, and I swear this looks exactly like the duty-free area in Bangkok Airport. Like exactly. And then other people have been saying it looks like Lala Port, which is a mall over in Odaiba. I mean, it's just like, why would you like tear down trees and build something like this? The lack of taste is also an issue. The ginkgo trees, the developers are saying, well, we're not going to tear down the big ginkgo trees. The ginkgo trees are going to be fine. However, they're going to build a stadium only 8 meters away from the ginkgo trees. And actually, Professor Ishikawa, who's at Chuo University, and she's a famous landscape architect expert, had been involved with, at one point they wanted to put a road through Jingu Gaien, and she had convinced them to instead make a tunnel underneath. And when they did the tunnel for the construction, there were some ginkgo trees nearby, and that was like 40 years ago. And so since then, she's been monitoring what happened with the trees. And she published a study this fall that showed that any construction within 15 meters of the trees caused damage. So in Jingu Gaien, any trees within 15 meters of that tunnel did not do well, often died. And so, and those ginkgos, actually seeds from them were ones used to, or seedlings were the ones that are put in Jingu Gaien. So they're the same trees, or the same DNA. And so, this is only 8 meters, and basically Professor Ishikawa says there is no way that these trees are not going to get killed by putting baseball stadiums so close to them. And in fact, she just came out with the other day that actually 4 of the ginkgo trees are already starting to have health problems. But there's a couple that at the top did not have leaves. And she hypothesizes that that's because of the cafes I just showed you. And those were put in like 40 years ago. So over the course of time, and so she says, they put in the baseball stadium, it's not going to kill the ginkgo trees immediately, but she's like, for sure it will eventually. So all which leads into the question is, why does Governor Koike want to be known as the governor who destroyed Jingu Gaien? It really doesn't make sense to me. When I started the petition in February, we were aiming at convincing Governor Koike to not approve this plan, but she went forward with it, and she has stuck with it. Even though Tokyo Shimbun poll showed 69.5% of Tokyo voters were against the Jingu Gaien redevelopment plan. Now, what politician presses forward with a plan that 69.5% of the public is against? I mean, isn't that like malpractice as a politician, or self, shooting yourself in the foot, or just like self-defeating, self-sabotage, I guess is the word I want. So I really don't understand why she cares about doing this project so much that she overrides this tremendous risk for herself. So there's something very fishy to me about that, personally. Now, another thing that I've learned, because I've just been learning so much to be involved in this, is environmental assessments in Japan happen after a project is approved, not before. I was shocked when I worked there. I was like, what is the point of that? And so there's been all this drama with the environmental assessors and their committee. And, you know, it's kind of like all the kind of community input and all the issues that really the Tokyo Metropolitan Planning Commission should have been listening to and addressing in their decision making, they never listened to. And so then it's fallen on the environmental assessors, even though a lot of stuff is not completely in their scope. But people were so outraged about this, and a lot of people contacted the assessors and wrote them letters, and then there was a hearing where people were, you know, very heartfelt and you know, et cetera. And you know, the assessors, to their credit, have really taken it upon themselves to try and address all these issues that come up. I kind of feel sorry for them because learning Japanese is Maganage, and so I'm trying to think how do you say that in English. Like, you know, it's just like the planning commission said, you deal with that, even though they should have been handling it. So the environmental assessment commission is kind of dealing with stuff that they really shouldn't even be having to deal with, but they are. And to their credit, they've done something that in the world of environmental assessment in Japan is actually epic making, that usually the end of the environmental process, assessment process is called koshi. It's an official reply. And they issued theirs in August, but instead of just making it a green light, they attached some stipulations to it that said, you know, you got to go check on this, and you got to research what's going to happen with the tree roots, et cetera, and then you have to come back to us. So that's slowing down the process. I don't think the Environmental Assessment Committee can actually stop a project the way you would in another country, but they are doing their best to try and exercise some, you know, parental controls on it, right? And so what that does is that gives us some time. So it means that the earliest that construction will start is in the spring. So now is kind of the golden opportunity to try and do something about this insane plan. So what's going on right now? So I'm involved with a lot of Japanese activists who've been working on this. Some of them are kind of veteran activists who, people who live, including people who live in the neighborhood, people who oppose the new national stadium, people who opposed nuclear power, people who opposed changing Article 9 of the Constitution. So there's some people I'm working with, and they know how to be activists. And so, which is handy, because they know about a whole lot of stuff I don't know about. And there's formal administrative procedures that are one of the few ways for private citizens to get involved in government decision making that are called Jingu and Gaien. And so, and in fact, just today, there was a Jingu that was accepted in the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly that taught you again. It has some level of commitment to preserving the trees. You know, if they're, again, it's a strategy in doing things that often they're vaguely worried. We're big in order to get them accepted. So, you know, what the effect will be is, you know, it doesn't stop the whole thing, but it again, I think the idea is to build these things up. So, anyways, there's people working on those. There's people lobbying to different politicians. And actually, Hajime Funada, LDP politician, has been speaking out about this. Yes, I'm sorry. Speaking out about this, and he's putting together a cross-partisan or cross-factional group of diet members who are looking into this, and that's going to be announced this week. So that's kind of exciting. Let's get some national attention. Myself and other activists have been trying to get press coverage, and we've been doing study sessions. I've been doing webinars with various experts. I've got lots of videos of those if you want to listen to august Japanese professors talk about from their various professional perspectives why this is a bad idea. We've got lots of detail on that from lots of people with lots of credentials. And we've been doing study walks in the park, et cetera. So I also recently started a bunch of working groups that we have sort of self-organizing groups working on various projects. And so if you're interested in getting involved, I can tell you about those. We have one for English speakers as well. There have been some challenges. So I mentioned when I worked on Yoyogi Park, I couldn't keep the journalists away. I couldn't do any work. They were calling me so much. It's very hard to get anyone to cover this issue, even though really it's a much bigger issue. And I'm absolutely convinced that the Mitsui Fudosan, the main developer, Itochu, et cetera, and the city are putting pressure on the press not to cover this. In fact, I've had lots of people who know about this who say, it's weird they're not getting, this isn't getting attention or being talked about. It's like the word has come down, don't cover this story. So that's frankly kind of creepy. I had an incident this spring that I was supposed to be on a major internet news show, and I innocently tweeted about noon to all my followers, hey, check out such and such news show this evening, I'm going to be on it. We're talking about Jingu Gaien, and I'm really excited. And within an hour of that tweet, I got a call from the producer, oh, something more urgent has come up, and we're going to be covering that instead. I'm like, oh, well, I go, something urgent came up for today, do you want to reschedule? And then when I watched the show that night, it was not an urgent story. It was so clear that someone must have seen my tweet and then called in and like put the kibosh on it. So then I was like, oh God, I need to watch too. Which is kind of, well, I guess if you're tweeting something, it's not like it's that secret. But I just thought that was completely creepy. I hadn't ever experienced anything quite like that before. But that's at the level that this is. And so many different journalists have like, oh, I'm really interested in covering this. Oh, I went to my editorial meeting and they said no. Like it's fishy. I just have to say. So that's been really challenging for us. And I think also in Japan, there's this idea, well, you can't do anything about it anyways. So we're trying to overcome people's pessimism about things. One thing we have been advised is that attention from non-Japanese and from overseas would make a big difference. So if anyone has any connections with overseas media, or if any of you have your own platform where you blog or you YouTube, or if you know anyone who does, the more that we can get attention on this from outside Japan is helpful as well. So that's the end of my remarks. If you have not signed my petition, please sign. Also on one piece of paper in front of you, you'll get the same QR code petition as well. So that's my story, and that's what I've been working on lately. So and through this process, I've learned a lot about the issues and all the other development projects that are happening throughout Japan and that are a problem. So ultimately, I'd like to do something that brings together people who are fighting these crazy projects wherever they are. I'd love to lobby to change some of the rules around when we do environmental assessments, and the Japanese government promoting park PFI programs that are privatizing parks. There's lots of stuff to do, but first we got to save this park. And by saving this park, obviously it's very meaningful, and also to create some sort of example that it can be done. Because if you can't save this significant a park, then like all the rest of them are doomed. So that's it. I think I'll take questions.
That looks at Veritas, so that looks, so we have light. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Thanks a lot. Thank you to everyone. And we've had a few who came after your talk, so welcome to our new arrivals. I'd like to take the privilege of controlling the mic to ask the first question. Okay. You mentioned attention from overseas.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting. It's not surprising, because that's what we've often seen in Japan. But in most other large developed countries, if you were talking about a redevelopment plan in Berlin, in London, Paris, the key would be to get the local officials or something,
right.
centralized countries and national government. But I mean,
if I were at Chicago, I wouldn't care about what Japanese press says.
Right, or the
About-
French press.
You know, I wouldn't care about what my voters, my campaign contributors
Right.
think. But it's interesting that in Japan it does. So since you're an expert in Japanese culture, in Japanese business culture, in Japanese government issues, can you kind of explain why in a country as large and significant as Japan, foreign attention matters?
Right. Okay. That I'm glad you picked up on that because I think that's a very important point. That you probably heard the term gaiatsu, and so this is an example of gaiatsu. And so so many times in my work as a business person, I've seen examples of Japanese saying to people from overseas, "We can't change this situation ourselves, but if we get pressure from outside Japan, that will help." So basically, from my point of view, the fact that I need to be hoping, and praying that like the New York Times or the Financial Times or something like that picks up this story means that there is something really seriously broken in Japan. If the Japanese government can't listen to its own people and what they care about, and if getting overseas attention or losing face in that way is a bigger motivator, that just means that there's something really significantly broken in how political processes work here, right? So, again, saving face and how you look is very important in Japanese culture. I think in general, Japan is very concerned with its image globally. And so that's where the guidance comes. If Japan feels that it's looking bad globally, then that becomes a pressure for change. But the fact that that's needed means there's an underlying issue.
Thank you. Now, that was interesting. You understand how this we have back to saying early age, we want to look like a modern country, but I mean, this is where we're five. So we're way past me, but it still matters.
Right.
We are going to have time for about half an hour of questions, maybe a little more. So speak now or be peaceful, you silence forever. So here it is. You ask the first question. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Here it is.
Rochelle, I have never heard of this.
Oh, yeah,
actually.
maybe we can put the mic on. That's a good idea. Oh, you're a technology guy. It's okay. It's on.
I have actually never heard of this, and your presentation. I'm convinced. I'm convinced this is a bad thing. But I'm left with wondering if there was an intelligent person who was studying the other side, what would that person say, who had studied as deeply as you have studied it? What would that person say to try and convince us that this is a good idea to go forward with the plan?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And to be really honest, I have found that there are very few people who say this is a good idea. And so, I had the Tokyo Shimbun. It was 69.5% were against, and it was, I think it was 7%. It was way under 5%. It was way under 10% who were for it. So there's not very many people among the general public, and there's very few people among experts. So basically, the only voices for this project are the government and the developers. And if I've heard one or two people, there was a Tokyo Shimbun article earlier this year that claimed that the reason Meiji Jingu wants to do this, because they own a lot of the property. Part of it's Meiji Jingu, part of it's owned by the government through the rugby, the Sports Promotion Council. But they're saying that Meiji Jingu was having financial troubles, and that's why they wanted to do this. Okay, I'm sorry, I have an MBA with a finance concentration, and I cannot believe that Meiji Jingu has financial problems. They have the most Hatsumode New Year's visitors of any shrine in the entire country. They have people who get married in Meiji Jingu, and I'm sure that costs a pretty penny. They have Meiji Kinenkan, which is a whole wedding catering facility on the right side of Jingu Gaien, which looks like it probably makes a lot of money. They're a religious institution, so they don't pay taxes. So I have not seen any numbers, but I would be willing to bet large sums of money that they do not have any financial problems. But there are some people who are like, oh, well, Meiji Jingu has financial problems, and we have to help them. So there's lots of, if they actually did have financial problems, Jingu Gaien was created through what was at the time the equivalent of crowdfunding. So common people gave money. They actually sent trees. So some of these trees in Jingu Gaien that are kind of sprinkled in the main area. Let me just get the map out here again. Some of these ones in here, if you go through, some of these trees are kind of mismatched and random. Because people sent trees from all over, and in fact, some came from overseas as well. So there's like a couple palm trees in there. There's definitely like some variety of trees in here, because people donated them. And over, I think it was it 40,000 or 50,000? It was in the tens of thousands of people contributed manual labor to creating this. So it was a giant project. So was the Gaien, the inner garden, which is the part over near Harajuku with which is the stately quiet forest, that was built at the same time as this. But it was a huge project. And so people today would be willing to do something. If they actually do have financial problems, there's other ways to do it. So what are the other arguments that the city is making? Most of their arguments, frankly, are not logical. They are strings of advertising phrases. It's going to be a Nikiwai, sports cluster. Like all these things, Koike likes these like katakana terms. So she's like, it's going to be Nikiwai, which is what they've been saying about like all these parks, like vibrant and bustling. Why does a park need to be vibrant and bustling? Part of the charm of Jingu Gaien now is that it's quiet and you can hang out, right? So Nikiwai to me sounds like money making, but so they say that, and so it's going to be a sports cluster. I'm like, what? It's a sports cluster. You're taking away most of the sports facilities that common people use. So they say there's a whole thing on their chart that doing this is going to make like a better flow of people through the space. I'm like, okay, you're going to tear down all this stuff to have a better flow of people? Like, does that really make sense? Anyways, that's one of the big arguments. They're going to be, they use the word barrier-free, that somehow they're going to make some like special route for wheelchairs to get to the stadium or something like that. Which again, my late sister used a wheelchair, so I'm very sensitive to wheelchair users. But like, that's not a reason to redevelop a huge space like that. There are other things you can do. In fact, I had someone arguing with me about, like the Jingu Gaien, the Jingu Stadium, it's not friendly to wheelchair users. And I pulled up a blog from the wheelchair baseball fan or something like that. There's a guy in the United States who's confined to a wheelchair who uses a wheelchair, who he visits, he's a baseball fan, and he visits baseball stadiums and he rates them on how accessible they are and what experience he has as a wheelchair user using them. And he talked all about how they had made Jingu Gaien Wrigley Field in the retrofit accessible to wheelchairs. And he says it's one of the best experiences I've had in a wheelchair in any baseball stadium in the US. So it's not like it can't be done. So I kind of don't like using them using that as an excuse, because I don't feel it's really right. So that's the kind of stuff it has. It's not very convincing. The other thing that I'm just going to mention about these office buildings that again bothers me as an MBA with a specialization in finance is I don't think it makes a lot of financial sense to be building tall office buildings right now for two reasons. One, this plan was created before the coronavirus pandemic. So the need for office space in Tokyo has changed significantly due to remote working, and particularly larger companies doing remote working. So you see lots of larger companies now are reducing their space. The other thing is, has anyone heard about the 2023 cliff? Okay, so so I'll explain it for everyone who hasn't heard of it. So already right now in Tokyo, the office vacancy rate is over 6%. So 6% is evidently the magic number. And if your vacancy rate is above that, it means you have too big a supply of office space. So that's the current situation, partially due to the remote working, et cetera. On top of that, in 2023, there are multiple new major developments coming online. So there's the big thing they're building in Toronto. There's the big thing that they're putting in Yaisu. There's some of the new stuff that's coming into Shibuya. And there's like a bunch of other ones. And it's called the 2023 cliff because the market is going to be flooded with office space. And they have no idea how they're going to fill these buildings. So in the midst of that, why would you build new buildings in Jingu Gaien, which is the centerpiece of this project, was supposed to be making money? Again, I want to see some financial projections on that because I'm just not buying that it makes any sense. And if anyone's doing financial projections, they're probably based on ridiculous assumptions.
Next, if you can introduce yourself, since you're about.
Hi, my name is Ken Oda. I do real estate business in Yaisu, and I'm also the victim of the reconstruction project by the same perpetrator for the real estate. And I've been saying this same argument for the past 10 years, exactly what you've been saying. And the answer is this. It doesn't matter. The result, it's not the logic. They just need to have some soundbite talking points. And I do know Yaisu Midtown, which opened in September, 50% of the floor is vacant, but they don't care. Why? Once the reconstruction project is over, construction company gets the money, developer gets the money, and the rest of it goes to the landowner. So, sayonara.
Right. That's
the point. So,
yes, that is exactly what's happening.
It doesn't matter it's not the logic.
No, it's not the logic. It's the greed of the construction and developer.
And also about the media, I've been having the same problem for the past 10 years. And again, advertisement by real estate are very huge. And right now, a lot of media are real estate company as well. They make profits through the lending spaces, office spaces they have. So this is the big scam. And also the one reason why Olympic was held is able to do this.
Right.
This I heard exactly quote from former Minister of Labor for Shinne Yamaguchi said to me. So we've been fighting this huge problem. This is one of the deepest cancer of Japanese society. That's all.
Thank you. Yes. No, I really do think it's a cancer. That's a good way of putting it. It's definitely, it's either a cancer or you could also say it's an addiction.
Both.
Yeah, it's both. It's like well, I guess maybe you can say it's like cigarettes, which cause cancer and are an addiction. It's kind of like that. Because the Japanese government is addicted to building things. The Japanese economy is addicted to building things. And so, the amount of construction that happens here, the amount of concrete that's used, is completely out of proportion to other places. And it's not been good for a long time, but now it's increasingly out of step with what makes sense for the society as you have a shrinking population, and you've got Tokyo as a heat island effect getting hot, and you have also the just overall what's Japan contributing to global warming. Making big concrete buildings makes lots of CO2.
Pricing plastic bags.
Right, yes, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's like little measures of the thing. So how many plastic bags do you have to save to make up for 190 meter building? You'll be saving plastic bags for the next million years, right? So first is, how is the city involved in this? So there's been just a bunch of very tricky maneuvers that have been done to make this plan. And part of what they did is there is a Koen Machi Zukuri Seido that the Tokyo government has. And so that's a plan where they take quote unquote, underutilized portions of parks and give them to private corporations to make something on. So there's a park, I forgot what it's called in Shibuya, not Miyashita one, but another one that has a Blue Bottle Coffee in it. Does anyone know that one? It's in the back street in Shibuya. So it's a park and it has a Blue Bottle Coffee. And so they said, oh, this park is being underused, so we're going to put something there to utilize it. So there's this system for privatizing parks. So they're privatizing the space where those high buildings are, and under this Tokyo rule, by claiming that the space in the rugby field is underutilized because there aren't games there every day. Which is like such a, like twisting yourself to make that work. It's really ridiculous. Anyways, so the Tokyo Planning Department has been involved in this whole thing, and the Tokyo Planning Commission approved it, and then Koike had to approve it. So really, kind of the buck stops with her on this thing. But as I said, she let it go through. So that's kind of the Tokyo government involvement, and especially because this is a Tokyo under-city planning, it's a park. So it's kind of weird because the land is owned by Meiji Jingu and the Japan Sports Promotion Council, but as a planning zone, it's planned as a park. So there's a city planning thing. One thing I should just mention, just to make clear what happened with the Olympics, is when they we're going to rebuild the new national stadium. In order to make it possible to build it as high as it is, and I think originally they're thinking for the original Zaha approach, which was going to be even taller, they needed to change the height restrictions that are over all of Jingu Gaien as a landscape protection area. So rather than just removing the height restrictions where the new national stadium is, they removed them over the whole park. So people at the time were like, why are they doing that? Are they going to develop the whole thing? And of course, that was what their plan was. So this goes back a long way. Second question is who are the developers? Main developer is Mitsui Fudosan. And then also involved in this are Meiji Jingu, Itochu, which has its headquarters right next to it, and it's going to get to be build their headquarters, and the Japan Sports Promotion Council, which is the government-related body that oversees the rugby stadium, and also owns some of the other land around the area. There's that Olympics-related building they own now. So that's who's involved. And remind me of the last one is the architects. They just unveiled the design for the rugby stadium. And I don't know who the architect is, but it's a big ugly box. So if I were an architect, I would be embarrassed by it. So I don't think it's really any nice architect who's doing it. I don't think they unveiled the plans for the baseball stadium, so I don't know. But I don't think they're using great architects. I think they're just making big boxes. Sadly.
Because in 2 years, they have more than 300 architects within the company.
Yeah.
In order to save money, they just use within their home.
Right. And then you get the issue of everything starts to look the same.
Because they're easy to create.
Right.
You say everything look at another board. Exactly.
Yeah.
Same old style, no new different things.
Right. Yeah, and then you lose, I have a friend who works in urban planning in the US, and she talks about one of the things you care about in urban planning is making sure that there's a there. In other words, like if you're going to Tokyo, you want to look around and feel like you're in Tokyo. But these kind of generic things that are built the same everywhere, it takes away the there from there. Right, and then of course, no financial projections of any type have been shared. The other thing I'll just mention, just kind of jumping off of what you were just talking about, is I just want to remind people that when Tokyo bid for the Olympics, one of their arguments was it was going to be a quote unquote green Olympics, and they were going to reuse facilities. So they did not keep that promise because they tore down the old national stadium instead of reusing it, and they also did a lot of other things that tore down trees and knocked them in other places. So, they completely broke their promises. And one of the other things that I've just been really bothered by in this whole process is seeing the lack of accountability. That things happen and then no one ever follows up on it, and no one holds anyone accountable for that. Including in the Jingu Gaien, the Mitsui Fudosan was supposed to do X and was supposed to do Y, and then they fudged a bunch of numbers and things, and no one holds them to account. Koike makes these statements with all the advertising catchphrases, and no one pushes her on what does it really mean. So I feel like I've been very disappointed in the Japanese press also. They're not performing their watchdog function. Yeah, there was a question in the back.
Oh, she, I think we'll, the mic. And I think afterwards we're coming to one more question.
Okay.
Or you accepted that help?
Thanks, Rochelle Kopp. I'm Toshi. I used to be a student at Temple, and I found your comments very insightful and valuable. And as a young talent, I found it very inspiring and astonishing because you see the long vision and you keep pushing forward. And as a citizen of Japan, I also find that I felt touched by your passion. But my question was, where is your root cause of such a big passion to this project? And because I was just naturally curious that I myself wouldn't be as much passionate as you in pushing something in London or New York or Paris or Beijing or whatsoever. Maybe, of course, I would be very curious and passionate, but I wouldn't be as I wouldn't make my voice into an action as much as you are doing, which is very motivating. And so I was wondering why Japan and Tokyo, and my follow-up is why this specific Jingu project as your main activity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm just a person who's passionate about a lot of things, so that's just my personality is one thing. But also, I think that there's two major things. That one, I feel like I'm in a position where I can actually make an impact with this, and that makes me motivated. But I think non-Japanese have a very special role in Japanese society, that because of this whole Gaiatsu thing, people do listen to us, and it makes an impact. When I walk into, I'm walking around City Hall, like I'm going to all these activists to meetings, and it's like, oh, Rochelle showed up. People will listen to what I have to say. So I feel like I have an opportunity. Also because I have a platform, and I've got almost 30,000 Twitter followers, etc. So I kind of have a platform, and I also have freedom to speak out. That I'm my own boss. I don't have to worry like a lot of people who work for Japanese companies or other companies, like what is my company going to say? My company's, I'm the boss. And so I can do whatever I want. And so I don't have to have that fear. So that means that I can speak out. And what I found in many times in my career is that often if a non-Japanese person takes the first step and speaks out about something, that makes it easier for Japanese to realize that it's an issue or feel confident in pushing forward. I think a lot of times in Japanese society, it's hard for Japanese to speak out and take that first step. So I feel like that's something that I can do because it's easy for me to do that. So that's like a unique contribution that I can make. And if I have an opportunity where I can be impactful, then why not use it? This is kind of my feeling.
Let me ask you one more question, then I'll ask the last question. Oh, sorry, we give the mic.
Okay.
So Tom, last question for you.
I thank you for the presentation. It's very inspiring. And I have actually two questions. One is kind of a short question. Like, according to their plan, when will they execute that plan? That they will actually do that? long time that we do have in order to stop them, yeah.
It looks like, we don't have an exact date yet, but it's likely to be this spring.
This spring.
Yes,
Oh.
yeah, next, it's this coming spring.
Oh, this
Yeah.
coming
So we only have a short period of time to try and do something.
Okay, and the other question is that about the of course some comments about how it seems like there's a game between those people who really want to protect this area and those who can actually benefit from these projects. I mean, those people, if they really implement this project, change everything, they're going to earn money, but they probably going to offend those people who are around there. I know Japanese people, they care about relationships very, very much. And which also means that how the people who are impacted by this, negatively impacted by this program are really willing to stand up and what the actions like protest or whatever. And I know that in China there's the government there they want to tear down the cross in some of the cities in the churches like the church. They want to tear down the churches in Zhejiang province, and a lot of people they just gather around the church. They protect the government from doing that, and there was violence. And if the Japanese government, the citizens, they want to protect the Jingu or they want to protect this part. If they really do something as radical as that in China, I don't think that Japanese government dare to send the whatever the police or whatever to. Yeah.
Last pitch plan is I'm chaining myself to one of the trees.
Yeah.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But if necessary, I will.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me ask the last question. You talked about the fact that the fact you're a foreigner helps. Do you think it's effective to a foreigner or Western foreigner? In other words, if you were
Interesting question.
Korean, Chinese, Congolese, would it be the same thing?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't. I also think the fact that I speak Japanese very fluently makes a big difference, because I can kind of play on the same playing field, and I can go to meetings with people who don't speak English, and I can have intelligent conversations in Japanese, or give a press conference in Japanese. So I think that the language ability makes a big difference. But yeah, I think being American and being a white American, I'm sure it has an impact as well.
Well, thank you very much, Rochelle. We're very appreciative that you've donated so much of your time to friends and colleagues for events. And we'd like to thank the University of Chicago Alumni Association and the Yale Club of Japan for doing this. So this will be at one point on our website. And if it's okay with you, we'll also put the slide.
Oh, yes. Sure.
Okay, so thanks again. And if you're not on our email list, just give me your business card and we'll add you to the list. Thanks again. Thank you.